The idea for this project came to me in the fall of 2014, and I was looking to do a unique, interesting project, something that I have never done before, and I was searching for thoughts and ideas to involve Paris. And at some point my mother told me, why don't you just start reading Chopin's letters? And I did. I wanted to visualize what I was thinking, what I was reading, what I was playing, but I didn't want this to be just my personal view without having anything to do with Chopin and his life. It was such an incredible experience. I will never forget that. And I could never imagine it would actually happen and it would be this great. Chopin immigrated from Poland to Paris and he never came back. And I was thinking, why? He had a possibility to do it. He could have done it. And this question actually is not directly answered in the project, but one of our goals was to have the audience ask themselves the same question. There are other questions that are not answered, and we particularly did not want them to be answered because this project is not just unfolding the facts. It's more poetic and it's more, I would call it an artistic research. We wanted people to actually have questions and think about them. We did not want to just give answers because we did not want to pressure the audience with our own ideas.
My dear life, I arrived here fairly comfortably, though expensively, and I'm glad that I am remaining here.
I first got in touch with this beautiful project when Elina contacted me a while ago through a common friend we have in New York. I have to say it didn't take much time for me to be convinced by it. I was really touched, and that's when my involvement actually began. What first attracted me was the simple idea of intertwining artistic disciplines in order to create and present a subject through different angles. Surprisingly, that's something that is not very common, especially in the world of classical music. But for me, that's the best form of art. The use of different types of art in order to express a sort of 3D image of a message or a subject. And I think that's what the audiences want to see too. Something that really makes them feel and grasp what is at stake.
Another very important thing that is displayed in the project is Chopin's complicated personality, because he was always around to such a huge number of people, and at the same time he would write to his family and close friends and he would say, I have nobody with whom I would sigh. It's actually a direct quote, and it's actually contradicting itself. How come can a person be so social and at the same time so closed up and lonely? For somebody who has immigrated, he got used to it better, but he never actually felt at home, so he was always alone to some extent. And I believe that during those times he actually had the most successful times creating. And we wanted to spill some light on the process of creation, this torment and the suffering.
It was also a discovery for me, and in that way a sort of challenge.
Oh, how time goes. I don't know how it is, but I can't do anything of any value.
I have to admit I didn't know much about Chopin at first. That's also why I can say very honestly how much this project is interesting and stimulating. There is so much to know about Chopin, the human being and the creative person, in order to really understand and appreciate his music. What we get out of it is something that is completely universal, that can touch just about anybody. That's also why we wanted to stretch out this idea of associating different genres and different elements and also different languages. English, German, French, Polish. It's adaptable to any audience, and I think that's how it was meant to be.
It was embodied really, really in a great way by Nathanaël, who was reading the letters and the poems. What he does is that he actually represents two characters. The first character, we call him Florestan, because the project opens up with the representation of Chopin by Robert Schumann. Schumann said his very, very famous quote, "Hats off, gentleman, a genius." And he felt that this young composer who just wrote his first published works, he was a genius, and he wanted to make this huge call so people would pay attention. And that's how Chopin got represented to Europe pretty much in the German newspaper Allgemeine Musikalische Zeitung. And so here is this crazy Florestan running up the stage and just saying chapeau bas, heads off, right?
Chapeau bas, messieurs! Un génie!
So we wanted a representation of Chopin by somebody, and of course the most appropriate person was Schumann. And then this character disappears for a while, and we see the reader who walks into this room and he finds this stack of old letters among some dusty papers laying around, and he just randomly starts flipping through and reading, and he finds one long letter to somebody, and we don't know who it is because this person didn't exist. So it's a letter to a non-existing friend of Chopin and maybe each of us. It's like a confession, and we start where Chopin came to Paris and he says that he just arrived and he's new and he has the opera nearby and he's surrounded by amazing artists. And we finish off with Florestan, the imaginary character, and at the end he concludes everything by reading Norwid's famous poem, Chopin's Grand Piano.
If I were well, I would pay a visit tomorrow to embrace you.
I worked a lot on the idea of making this more than just readings of letters, because I think pure readings are not a strong enough media. And on the other hand, the real struggle was not to fall into a strict interpretation of Chopin. I didn't want to show Chopin writing letters on stage or reading books. That's not the point, and I think that would be totally uninteresting. So there it was, the in-between, which was the most challenging element for me, but also the most exciting. As I see it, my part symbolizes Chopin's personal side and his reflections, while Elina's part symbolizes his creative side, and the two combined create Chopin's portrait.
We have 4 poems, so we have 3 by Norwid, 1 by Mickiewicz. Poetry can actually give the audience something that the letters cannot. I would say it's a medium between the music and the letters. A couple of them are read by Nathanaël as the reader, and it's his own reaction to the letters he just read. And another few poems are read by the imaginary character to remind us that it's about the feelings, it's about these inner emotions, inner torments. It's only something that one can purely feel, and the poems actually can deliver this better than the letters, I would say.
War is coming. Winter is coming.
Winter is coming.
Above all, I think this project is about the question of creativity. What does it mean to create? Personally, it has been a beautiful journey because it took me out of my comfort zone as an actor. I was professionally trained at the Lee Strasberg Institute in Los Angeles, in New York. When you're working in theater and film, it's sad to say, but you don't often get the chance to work and participate in projects that are that original in terms of their nature. I really got to feel like I was presenting an image that made sense on its own and was already worthy as such, but also an image that made even more sense when attached to the other parts of the project. Here, the piano and the visual projections. And of course, working with Elina has been such a privilege. I don't know how to say it differently, but when you're working alongside such a level of talent, it makes you very humble. No harm to the props, blah blah. It's no English. And also it makes you really push forward even stronger. I've been really lucky for that.
It's a new means of presenting art because we have limitless possibilities of how to present whatever we want to show. But it gets more difficult. I made a huge research while creating the photographs. I was in Poland, I was in Żelazowo, where Chopin was born. I was in Warsaw. I was all over Paris. I attended various addresses. I was trying to get in everywhere I could. It took about 1.5 years to create this whole thing before we actually had our very successful premiere. I think it's right now the most memorable day of my life. I think that this road is just starting and I want to do more projects of intertwining arts together. I think that this is something totally wonderful. It's just fascinating to think of how much one can actually bring forward and display to the audience and discover for oneself. I hope that we succeeded in actually emphasizing the things we're aiming to emphasize in this project, and I really hope